since it's a new year, is it easier to get a job now than later in December, or are companies actively searching in the beginning of the year?
Absolutely. In the beginning of the year, there are budgets that are available. A lot of headcount planning would have been done in Q4 of last year, depending on the business. And so a lot of companies are coming out of the gate. People are back from their holiday. And so top of mind is a lot of goals that companies need to hit. And a big component of that is making sure that they have the right talent in the right seats.
Okay, so that makes sense. So I want to talk, and I saw your video yesterday. It was on job postings, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It was like,
I'm a
yeah,
fan.
about
I
the whole
watched it.
job market and just everything wacky that's happening.
Okay, so it sounds like this, and correct me if I'm wrong. Are some job postings kind of fake then?
What we're seeing is the rise of ghost job postings, which is essentially job postings that are online that the companies are not currently hiring. Now, you asked, are they fake? Not necessarily. They are often where the companies will simply leave the job up. They already hired someone, but they're leaving it up for whatever reason. They forgot, or they're just hoping to gather other candidates in case that person pulls out before their start date, whatever it is. Or companies will put up job postings because they want to seem like they're growing. There's just lots of different reasons why there's postings out there that you're not even going to ever hear back from or are not really even open. And so that's really frustrating for job seekers.
I like this because it sounds like you have like the because you were HR, right? Like a
Yes.
HR. So it sounds like you have like the inside scoop of like what companies kind of want to keep below like the surface. That's why I like your YouTube channel. Um, okay, so if a company has a job posting, but they plan on hiring within, like promoting within, do they legally have to post the job and to, like, Indeed, or how does that work?
So if a company is planning on hiring someone who has is on some sort of a work visa, there's a lot of laws about how you need to try to hire someone who is a United States citizen before you hire someone who is from another country. Uh, and so sometimes that happens of they have to go through the motions of posting that job and interviewing a few people, and that is something that happens a bit and can be super frustrating. That doesn't You can't assume that all jobs have that, or it's not always obvious, but that is a component that people get really demoralized from.
Okay, and then the video yesterday, um see, I'm a fan, right? The video yesterday, is one of the reasons that jobs have you call it ghost posting or ghost job
Mhm.
listing to motivate their workers? That's one of the reasons, right, that companies post? Can you talk about that
So
more? Yeah.
yeah, so there's a whole list of reasons why there are ghost job posts. The reason you're hitting on is, yeah, companies will leave them up to motivate workers. I am a little bit confused by that phrasing in the survey. What I have personally seen is leaving up job postings so that if key players, key team members from your team leave, you have already a group of candidates who have applied who you can then start pulling from. So it does leave the employer in a little bit of a more secure position to where you're not relying so much on those employees because there's people essentially waiting in the wing.
Okay, so some of it is like they want just a pool of candidates just in case, people leave and it's just a
Right.
quicker process. Okay, that makes sense. And then when I was on Indeed, it seems like a lot of job postings, they don't have their salary listed. That doesn't shock you? So why do they do that Do they want to lowball you, or well, so yeah, what's with that?
There aren't Okay, so There are a lot of reasons why a company would prefer to leave off salary from their job descriptions. A lot of states now are requiring that you put salary on there. But the reason why, if a company doesn't have to do it, they might not do it because they have other people in that role or at that company who can then look at that salary and say, oh, this range goes all the way up to 130,000. Well, I'm making 110,000. Manager, why aren't I making 130,000? And then it becomes this whole conversation. Additionally, companies will don't always want to put a range because then they have to rationalize, okay, if this person is coming in and we want to give them an offer for 100,000 and the job description says we'll go up to 120,000, then they have to really fully explain, okay, here's why you're at this level versus that level. And if companies have not done really strict, thoughtful work on positioning out who is worth what and what skills are worth what, it can make for a more cloudy conversation. And in the end, it's it seems obvious of, oh yeah, certain number of years of experience, certain education should have certain compensation. But truly, once you're actually in the trenches, you're a hiring manager, you're an HR manager, you realize it's a lot more of a gray area than you'd think.
Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, so when job postings, because I've talked to recruiters, like journalism ones, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And and some of their or some companies post like 3 years required. And then I talk to the recruiters and I'm just like, do they really want 3 years? And like, no, they're like, not really. So do you see like that happen with other jobs? So yeah, when a company wants like, I want 3 years, should people who have less even bother to apply?
Okay, so you're saying that once you actually talk to the recruiter, they would be okay with fewer years of experience. Is that what you're saying?
My case or in my field, yes.
Okay. So usually what's happening there is companies, especially for lower level roles, such as entry level, it's entry level, but yet they're asking for 3 years of experience, which seems to be a bit of a disconnect. You're not entering the profession at that point. You've been there for 3 years. But what they're actually saying is, we don't want to train you from ground zero. They want this person to come in with some sort of industry knowledge, with some sort of skills, because it actually is extremely challenging to train someone from the ground up. And that's not just training them the skills, but if you've ever hired someone who's super entry level, you're training them how to email, how to have professional communication, how to communicate their ideas. So that is what they're doing. Is if you can show that you have a good head on your shoulders, that you have that professionalism, that you have some skills, it could be that you just have 6 months of experience and you get that job. But it's really about them saying, we just don't want to start from someone who has never had a job before, and we are teaching them everything about what it's like to work in a business.
Oh my God. So that's what that means.
Yeah.
That's your next YouTube video, eh?
Okay, okay, I dig it, I dig it.
That's funny though. Okay, because I noticed that too. And if we could go into that, do a lot of companies do do they not want to train their employees, or is that a trend, or
Correct. Yes,
yeah, I noticed that.
it's this trend is called helpless hiring,
Okay.
where you will hire someone who is ideally someone who's done this exact role in the past. And the reason why hiring managers are so specific about, oh, have they worked at in this exact industry at one of our competitors with this amount of experience, is because they don't want to train that person. And of course, you can't hire anyone and not train them. Even if they've worked in this industry before, every business, every organization has different ways of working. But it really is often a result of these hiring managers being overworked. They just want to get someone in the door. And also that most people aren't really good at training others.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. And can we talk about interview questions?
All right, sure.
What is the most common interview question that employers ask?
It's tell me about yourself. That question is asked in every interview process, but sometimes in every single interview at the same company.
So you witnessed that many times?
Oh my gosh. It is the most common one, as well as I remember my most recent corporate job. I accepted the role and I really loved the company, but I had feedback for the hiring panel of, hey, I just sat through 4 interviews in a row. It was like 4 hours of interviews, and every single person started off the interview that way. And it was like, man, did you read my resume? Did you take time to like look at who I am? It's a bit of a lazy question.
I like that. So I guess when you answer that question, do they really wanna know about you or just your journey and how it relates to the job?
What they are really doing is it's an icebreaker. They came from a different meeting. They are context switching. And so they ask you that as a, okay, let's just break the ice. Okay, who are you? Get me acquainted, and then they can move into their other questions. What a lot of job seekers make the mistake of is they think it's the main event. So they spend 10 minutes answering that question, because any of us could spend 10 minutes telling someone about ourselves. There's so much to tell. And that actually is a huge pitfall and can often lead to not acing the interview.
And is there, like, a second most common question that you see besides, "Tell me about yourself?"
Why do you want this job? They really
Hmm,
want to know that. Why do you want this job? They sometimes will even ask it in, what do you want next? Like, what do you want next in your career? Why do you
I've
want
had
this
people ask
job?
me that, yeah. I've had that
Yes.
before.
So one of those versions, and really what they're trying to figure out is, do you really want to work here? Like, if we give you this offer, are you going to like this job, or are you going to leave within 6 months to when you actually find a job that's closer to what you were looking for? Because if you're picking up on anything I'm saying, the hiring manager and the hiring team hates hiring. They don't want to do it. They want to get back to their jobs and do the work. And so if you give a vibe like this isn't really the job you exactly want, they're going to cut you loose because they have a feeling you're going to leave fairly quickly if they give you the offer.
I feel like that's maybe is that not like I hire people, but I feel like that's such a make it or break it question, right?
Yes.
Probably even more than the first one, because the first
Yes.
one is more like an icebreaker, right?
Yeah. Right. The only thing that's make or break about the first question is that it is a first impression. And
Mm.
unfortunately, what a lot of psychology studies have found is that when you make a first impression with someone, it's difficult to change that impression. Usually the interviewer is either is confirming whatever was their first impression based on everything else you do. So that's why the tell me about yourself is so crucial. But you're right. This other question about what do you want next or why do you want this job? If you do not answer that in a way that makes them feel secure about what you want next, you're right. It's over.
Do they have a is a third one? Because I've had, referrals or where I had to be someone's, and then they're so I know some type of questions they ask. It seems like they always ask, "What is blah, blah, blah's greatest" or "What is their greatest weakness?"
Yes.
Does that come up in majority of interviews too?
Yes. Some version of what is your greatest weakness? What are some of the things that you're working on? What are the tasks you don't enjoy doing as much? All of those are versions of usually the hiring manager trying to figure out, first of all, truly what are your weaknesses? Like, should I put you in this role and will you fall flat? So they are trying to get you to say bad things about yourself. But the other side is, every person is dynamic. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. That's extremely normal. So I just want to understand the full picture of who you are so that if I was to manage you, what would that look like? How would I lift you up? How would I, how would I hire a team to where you will have complementary skills? So there's, but it's definitely another question where if you say one of your weaknesses is a core skill to the job, you're out.
What did you say? And, like, you probably heard people say this, "I don't have any weaknesses." Have you
Mhm.
heard that before?
Yes,
What
absolutely.
is that what do they think when someone's like, "Oh, I have to think about it," or like, I'm fine. I have no weaknesses."
I know you
Is that a
can't. What it comes across as is a lack of self-awareness, because everyone does have weaknesses, and so that's one of the worst answers you can give. Another version of that is, "Oh, I'm a perfectionist," or, "Oh, I tend to work too hard. I have to stop myself from working so much."
they
Those types
turn
of
it into a
things.
they turn their grief. That kinda makes sense, but it backfires, right?
It's a cliche at this point, and they want to actually hear about a true weakness, but the key here is to give it an actual weakness that isn't detrimental to the role. So
Mhm.
it's maybe a skill that's on the outskirts of the role where it's not core, and then also talk about how you're currently working on it. You shouldn't say that it's perfected at this point because it's still a weakness, but showing that you're already working on it is also great at showing that you have a growth mindset.
Oh my god, so it seems like interviews are almost like kind of like a game, right?
A
Kind of?
100%.
Like, and you have the strategy.
Hmm.
True though, I like this. Um, Now this is a question I'm asking for myself, not even the viewers, right? So if the manager that's supposed to be interviewing you, is it a red flag if they show up pretty late?
So here's the thing about job interview decorum, right? I mean, I even told you about that interview where I was in four-hour interviews, and that was like a terrible interview process. They took forever to get back to me when I came on site. Like they had me do hours of interviews without food, water, anything. And I
Oh,
ended up working for them, and they were a
oh,
phenomenal employer, and I loved all my coworkers and everything. And so I tend to think if a hiring manager shows up, or in any interviewer shows up late to your interview, I would file that as a data point, and I would look for other red flags, but I wouldn't say I'm not working for this company anymore. Like things
interesting.
happen, meetings run over, I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's really more about the way they talk about the company, the way they talk about their coworkers. That's where the huge red flags show up.
Review process is like if the guy's late or you're not getting fed for 4 hours. But talking about so what are the red flags? Is it talking bad about the workers, employees, or
Right. So the red flags are, I call them tiny flags, where if you hear a tiny flag, that actually means it's a massive flag or it's a solid red flag because everyone who's interviewing you is on their best behavior. So if their best behavior has a red flag, that red flag is a lot bigger than you'd expect. And I'll give you an example, such as if I ask you, if I was to work for your organization, I mean, do you all tend to work nights and weekends? And your answer was something like, uh, no, no, it's not that bad. No, no, you won't work nights and weekends. Okay, that means yes, you are going to be working every night, every weekend. Like, because it's like they're softening it. They're kind of they're making it less of a dramatic statement because they're being your interviewer. But if they were your friend and just talking about it, hey, do you work nights and weekends? Yeah, pretty much every week. Some weeks it's not so crazy, but once a month, like there's like a really crazy, busy period. So that's what I think you should look out for, are those things that are those little red flags that are ultimately really big ones.
so it was with that answer, it was like the tone of the voice, right?
It was tone of voice. You could take it as tone of voice, but what it was also was the hesitation of the answer. Like that person was kind of thinking about how much of the truth should I say, or if if you ask me, is that restaurant any good? And I say, oh, it's okay. In our conversation, it
Yeah.
probably means that's okay. But if it was in a job interview, it's okay means it was horrible, but I'm going to be nice in this job interview because I want you to go to the restaurant.
Do you have to follow up after your interview? Is that like a must? Doing like a follow-up email?
Okay, so there's two different emails that you could do. First is a thank you email. So is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Or okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So I would say always do a thank you email. It's
Really?
really, yes, it's wild how much interviewers appreciate it,
Mm.
because here's the thing, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before of the companies want people who really want this job, because
Mm.
it's scary to hire, because they're terrified that this person is going to again accept the role and then leave if it's not what they want. So a thank
Yes.
you email confirms, hey, I legitimately want this job. Like, I took this interview, yes, but like, I'm going to take additional steps because I'm truly invested in this opportunity. Now, a lot of job seekers don't see it that way because they don't get responses to their thank you emails, or they don't really see the other side of the process, or they hear one interviewer post on LinkedIn saying, I don't care about thank you emails. And they go, oh, it's debunked. Well, sure, maybe they don't care about thank you emails, but that sure as heck did not hurt you in the process to say thank you. So I really recommend doing it.
Is it a make or break if you don't send a thank you email than other candidates do? Does it show that maybe the other people want it more?
It was really interesting. In a recent hiring process we ran at my company, I was talking to one of my employees about who we should give the offer to. And one of the people who was in the final rounds, she would take a few days to respond to emails, and she wouldn't send thank you emails. And it wasn't that led her to necessarily not getting the offer, because the offer ultimately went to someone who was incredibly capable and a great fit, but it kept sending signals of this isn't really important to her. This isn't something, it's very normal for a job seeker to be responding to emails within like 3 or so hours after they receive them. Almost always job seekers respond same day, and also a lot of job seekers send thank you emails, and so it is a pretty stark contrast if you are kind of delayed with your responses and don't really follow up. It does show a level of a lack of interest in the opportunity.
That makes sense. And for the pool of people who apply, what is considered competitive? That's what I'm really curious about. Like if okay, so 50 people apply for a job. Is that considered a lot, or what is considered a competitive job to get based on the number of people who apply?
Okay, I understand what you're asking. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting when you see the inside of these applicant tracking systems that hold all of these resumes. You would be shocked at what percentage of those applications are actually legitimate, are actually qualified, are actually people who want the job versus people who are blasting out applications. There's also even this technology now where you can sign up for a bot to apply to a bunch of jobs for you, and it's really obvious on the side of the hiring team of, yeah, these 80, typically it's about 80% of applications are complete spam. So
What?
in
I did
if
not
we
know that.
yes, so if we had 50 applications, as you said,
Yeah.
you'd be competing against 9 other people, right? If you're the 50th application, because if we get rid of 80% of them, that leaves 10 people, including you. And so that then makes you realize, oh, wow, I have a 10% chance of just even roll the dice and I land the job. So it really depends on the quality of the applications, as well as the ease of having those skills, such as internships usually are extremely competitive
Yes.
because you don't really have to have a lot of skills to have
Mhm.
to land it. So it's like it's really, easy to get through the door. But you could also look at it the opposite way of, there's a lot of roles where the skills you need are really important, but it's also a role that a lot of people want, like such as a product manager. You do need specialized skills for that for sure, but it's also a very attractive, exciting role that a lot of
Yeah.
people want.
So you would say 80 something would be like a scam? Not a scam, a spam resume? How could you tell though?
Yeah, so you can tell through reading the applications. It's pretty obvious that, like, how does their background even connect to this role? It seems, their LinkedIn profile will say that they work in customer success, but the role they're applying for is for human resources, and you're like, what? Like, what is going on?
So there's a company, let's just say a news station, and like they have openings for a reporter, producer, anchor, cameraman. If there's one person that applies to like three of those, is that a red flag for companies? Do they say, I don't know if this person knows what they want, or like, is that a red
Correct.
flag? Okay.
Correct. If it is definitely red flag based on the diversity of positions you just named. If it was like close up camera person one, or other stage, camera person, it's like, okay, those are very similar jobs, you can apply to both of those, that's fine. We understand that maybe there's slightly different skill sets based on those, but yeah, we get it, that's what you're interested in. But you're right, if it is much different,
Hmm.
if it's much different positions, they're going to say, yikes, we're not going to hire this person for any of these.